Welcome so much. We're so excited. We want to welcome you to our weekly Wisdom Live, brought to you by none other than WOIII, Women of Impact and Innovation International, honoring wisdom while building the next generation of innovative women leaders. Each month, we'll be focusing on one topic. And each week, we'll be diving deep into that topic on different aspects. The month of July, our topic is Women in Business, Women CEOs, Business and Leadership. And we have someone very special today that's going to help us unpack that topic, a different aspect. This is Miss Sharon Anderson. She is the CEO of KCG Consulting. Welcome, Sharon.
Hello. Excited to be with you all today. Wherever you are watching from across the globe, morning, afternoon, evening, welcome. I'm excited about it.
Thank you so much, Sharon. As I mentioned, we're talking about women CEOs, the business aspect, the leadership aspect. And there was a certain aspect and dimension of that you wanted to talk to us about today. Share that with us.
Yes. So I am an author of a new book, Emotional Civility, the New Standard for Global Success. And what I do as a business consultant, business strategist, is that I do training, leadership training for executive level CEOs, deputy directors in government, directors in government. And I train on emotional intelligence, but also emotional civility. And emotional civility is a term that I have coined. Actually, it is recognized as a day in the archives of the United States government. And it's really just to get us to think about how we are processing information through our emotions while we're on the job, while we're dealing with our families, because sometimes we don't always do that very well. And so I want to talk to women leaders and business leaders about these two concepts. And when we get into it in a minute, I'll tell you why I chose that, because I think it's very important.
So Sharon, quite naturally, I'm going to ask the obvious question. Can we use emotional and leadership in the same sentence?
We actually can. Indeed, the whole concept of emotional intelligence and emotional civility is this. It is what makes people successful, whether it's a man or a woman in business, is not the technical skills. It's the ability to guide your life, your affairs, your communications through the aspect of emotional intelligence and emotional civility. Emotional intelligence is that set of competencies demonstrating that one has the ability to recognize his or her behaviors and moods and impulses and to manage them best according to whatever the situation. And statistics shows that those with the higher emotional intelligence and the higher emotional civility are the most successful. You can have all the book sense that you want. You can have all the technical sense. But if you do not know how to manage your emotions, which are very, very real, then you won't be successful. You will not rise to the highest level in your career because you do not know how to manage them. I think the misnomer that we have and the concept or the erroneous concept that we have is that we just stuff them. Right? We don't have them. Like you said, emotions and business don't fall into the same category. We don't use them in the same sentences, but we are human beings. And because we are human beings, wherever we go, we bring them with us. And so if you are not aware of what your emotional triggers are, if you are not aware of where you stand emotionally at any given time in any situation, you're more likely to process your emotions erroneously and make a misstep. Make the wrong call, say the wrong thing. And in some instances, that one wrong thing can either catapult your career to a lower level or knock you out of a negotiation because you haven't handled your emotions correctly. Emotional intelligence is what makes up a great employee, a great CEO, a great business person, a great entrepreneur, not just the technical skills. And this has been studied over the last about 10 years now.
Well, this is new to me, the term
Yes.
Actually, the persona is not, because I've seen that in business and leadership coming from a corporate background. I had 41 years in corporate America. I was a
Mhm.
corporate operations manager in a male dominated space.
Yes.
So, with that being said, do we as women have to be more careful with this emotional intelligence and that? So, can you speak to that?
Sure, sure. So I don't want to say more careful. I think everybody, men and women, need to process it. I do think that we as women are told that we are more emotional, right? We've always heard that. If anyone is excelling in their careers, we've always heard, oh, women are more emotional. That might be why you don't get the job, or you don't get the promotion, because of the perception that women are just more emotional. And because of that perception, I think I would agree that we have to be more careful and
Mhm.
cognizant of our emotions, because we in corporate spaces, in even government spaces, that's been used against us. Right. So we have to be more careful. And what that means, what does that mean? That just means we have to be more aware of them, because what emotional intelligence and emotional stability is about is awareness of your emotion. And so the fathers of emotional intelligence had identified 4 factors of EI, as we call it, that make up what emotional intelligence is and what it means. And one is your perception of emotion, right? And emotion's not bad. Emotion is not bad. It's just how you use it when you use it. Number 2 is the ability to reason using emotions. Number 3 is the ability to understand emotions. And then 4 is what everybody thinks about, the ability to manage the emotions. So perception, ability to reason, ability to understand, and ability to manage. And when you start really operating and understanding those 4 factors, and apply that to your emotions at any given set of situations, you're more likely to be operating with what we call high EI, or high emotional intelligence. And high emotional intelligence is what really leads to success in all of our careers and all of our spaces. There are also 5 skills that enable someone to determine whether they're operating with high EI. And there's these tests that people take. And actually now corporate America actually gives them out to kind of determine whether or not the person that they're hiring is operating at a high EI level, because they realize that's the jam. That's the thing that's really going to make that person valuable to the company, not just the technical skills. So the 5 components of EI is self-awareness. Remember, I talked about
Mhm.
coming to your space and understanding and being aware of your own emotions. So I'll just give an example. If someone in your life passed, right? My own testimony would be, and the reason why I even got into this sphere of study was because I lost my father at the same time my husband left. And
Ooh.
so I was dealing, it's kind of 2 coverings. If anybody, I'm also a pastor, so I deal with, the spirituality as well. And so my father died, my first covering, my first love, and he was my best friend. We were very close. And then my husband left. And so I was grieving. And I didn't understand stages of grief and grieving. I was one of those women, push it through. My father taught me to be a strong woman. I'm an attorney by trade. And so you don't get that far if you're just operating outside of your emotion. But I was not taking into account that I was grieving. I also didn't know that I was, the stress of that had triggered diabetes. And so I was walking around with sugar at the 600 and 700 level, which also
Ooh.
affects your emotions. So I was an emotional ball, but I wasn't aware of it. And so when people would say things that wouldn't otherwise bother me, when I was in maybe difficult negotiations or disagreements in business, I found myself acting out in a way that I wasn't used to, because that was not my personality. It certainly wasn't the way I was, quote unquote, trained. And that was because I wasn't self-aware. Without being self-aware, you can't self-regulate. So first is self-awareness, second is self-regulation, third is motivation. And motivation really has to do with wanting to be the best you can be, having a reason to excel and be the best in whatever space you're working in. And certainly I was motivated to be the best, so that wasn't the issue. Empathy is the fourth component, and empathy just means that you care about yourself and you care about how you make other people feel. You don't want to say things and do things to hurt people, right? So I'm certainly an empathetic person, so that wasn't an issue for me. And social skills, I certainly had been taught social skills and being polite and all that from day one, but I was failing at the self-awareness, self-regulation stage because I just was trying to press through it, right? I was just trying to push through it. I was trying to make things seem as normal as possible, where inside all this stuff was boiling up. And until I turned to address those things and became more self-aware, I was not operating in a very emotionally intelligent way. And so again, we're talking about women in business. And do I think women are more emotional than men? No, I think that that's a misnomer. Some men are very emotional, right? They're angry, they're loud, you know, they just display it a little differently. They're mean, right? If you ever had male colleagues or bosses, that are like that. Men tend to, right, societal, and it's accepting, right? The harshness, the meanness, the gruffness, but that is not emotional intelligence either. And so being self-aware of how you're coming off to other people, being self-aware of how you are feeling at that time. And it could not be nothing at work. It could be something at work that's triggering whatever emotions that you have. It could be that you're a hangry person. So if you're hungry, angry, and tired, that's not the time to go into a major negotiation. Right. That's self-awareness, because self-awareness leads to self-regulation. If you know when you're hangry, that you tend to be a little sharp, you don't process as well. You don't put something on the table at the time when you haven't had your coffee or you haven't had lunch or whatever those triggers are that cause an emotional reaction that could actually be of detriment to whatever you're doing in that day. But that self-awareness piece and that self-regulation piece is very important. And I think that we as women oftentimes, particularly at the top of our game, at the highest levels of our careers, have been taught to push through it, have been taught not to have them. And the stuffing of it, the failure to be self-aware that you have them, that an argument at home, that children having issues, whatever they may be, can cause emotional reactions in us that we have to acknowledge and address so that we can regulate them correctly, so that we're not bringing it into the workplace, and so that we're not making major decisions or flawed conversations and negotiations because we're operating from an emotional state.
Well, speaking of emotional, I just have to ask, is it okay for a woman to cry? What are your thoughts on that? Because I do know some managers, upper level managers, that have had a meltdown and cried. So can you weigh in on that?
Again, I think the misnomer, and you got to really read about emotional intelligence and emotional civility, does not mean that you don't cry. It doesn't mean that you don't get angry, right? It just means that you are aware of it, so that when you are displaying the emotions, you are doing it in a way that's appropriate, or in a way, if it just kind of comes out, that you're addressing it so that it is not disruptive. So yes, it absolutely. It's okay to cry. I've cried in situations where I feel that I've been hurt, but if you're crying all the time, then that's an issue.
Got an issue.
But if it's a buildup, again, this happened at home, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and now you're at work and something else has happened, and it just kind of comes out. That's fine, because the self-awareness component that I just talked about, the definition of that is the ability to recognize and understand your moods, your emotions, and drivers and their effects on others. And the hallmark of that is self-confidence and a realistic self-assessment. The self-regulation is that ability to control or redirect disruptive impulses and moods. And the hallmark of someone walking in that component is trustworthiness and integrity. But you also have a comfort with ambiguity and you're open to change. So if you break down and cry in the middle of something that where you might not normally do that, it shows vulnerability, right? It shows that you're human. And again, if it's come at an inappropriate time, the self-regulation allows you to come back and address it in some way. But I don't think that, we should stand, and this is what emotional intelligence has taught us. You don't say that women don't cry, men and men don't cry, and people in upper level management can't cry. And, that's death to their position and that's death to promotion. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think that makes a lot of us feel a lot better about that. But what about the other side of the spectrum? As women, do we want to be so tough and so hard? Sometimes we go the other way, as managers, business owners, and we're so tough that people actually hate to hear your shoes hit the ground. And I'm sure you've seen movies like that where this woman comes in and she's tougher than the men.
Mm-hmm.
What can you speak to that?
Right. I've seen that as well. Not just seen movies. I've again, been held upper level management jobs in government and corporate America as well. And I've seen it as well. And I think I might have been accused.
I was wondering
because I think I sometimes have a very harsh tone. I will in my book. There's a chapter that is called Lions and Kittens. And when I made a transition from, again, lawyering, being a trial lawyer and working in the top levels of District of Columbia government, I went to work at a nonprofit for a faith-based organization. And I'm very direct. I still am. I don't mince my words. I say what I mean and I mean what I say. And I don't believe I'm mean, but if you're not used to working in the courtroom environment where everyone sounds like this, right? And everyone talks like this and everyone talks with their hands, you can perceive that that's mean. And so in making this transition, and I was starting a transitional house and I was hiring new people and people kind of from the community and the church world that had not had, I'm from New York as well. So everybody in New York is fast talking and seems very kind of a gruff and abrupt. It's not Southern. How you doing, sweetie? And, it's just, hi, now let's get on with our day. I was told, and they were saying to my pastor, who was my boss, she's so mean. And I never in my career had been told that I was mean. Like, very to the contrary. I was an excellent trial lawyer, very effective. The judges loved me. The court staff loved me. Never told that I was mean because everybody was walking at the same beat of the drum, but I now transitioned. And so my pastor said something that was revelatory to me. He said, "You are a lion in a room full of kittens." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "When you open your mouth, you roar. And that's just kind of what comes out because you were trained in a lion's den. And so now that you're in the room full of kittens, what do you think a kitten does if they hear a lion roar?" Well, if a kitten hears a lion roar, what do you think a kitten would do?
Oh, they're gonna run. I mean, it's fearful. They'll cower down, shake.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep. And so he said that's what's happening because they're not used to hearing it. Because I taught law school for 8 years and my students loved me, but they were all lion cubs, right? Because that was the field. They were not kittens. So when I went into this other, platform, he said, now you can tweak it in order to help them understand and feel more comfortable. He said, "I'm not going to fire you because I need you. But they're going to be coming in here every day or every other day talking about she's mean, she's mean, she's mean. So emotional intelligence and emotional stability is you doing something to make sure that the person across from you feels better. And that's what I've coined. And that's the study that I have written about. Emotional intelligence is that vertical. How are you processing your emotions? Emotional stability is how in the processing of my emotions is that affecting you? And so this whole lion and kitten scenario in your question about, what about the mean boss, is they exist out there, but emotional intelligence and emotional stability says, do you make an adjustment based upon your audience, based upon your team, so that you can be productive and they can be productive? Because if it's just, forget them, this is just the way I am, and this is, it's a man's world, and I got to be, mean, and I got to be gruff, and I got to meet that energy. When you come into a situation where it requires that adjustment and that massaging, you're not able to do that. And that affects the teamwork. That affects the productivity of the people that you're expecting to perform for you. So either way, crying all the time and not being productive and being too sensitive does not work. And being angry and tough and having that tough as nails exterior and not being approachable makes it so that people can't receive from you. And that's not productive either. And so emotional intelligence requires that you balance all of that and that you be aware of all of that, and you not be so closed-minded about the status that you're not being real about what is in you, which is a ball full of emotions that you have to manage on a daily basis in order to be the best you that you can be.
And Sharon, so I've learned a tremendous amount. I was aware that these emotions exist in women and men, and thank you for clarifying that. Men have emotional displays and way they handle things, but we just look at men and women differently.
We do.
But as we assess this, what can we do? You do coaching.
I do. Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to get our arms around that? What does that process look like? How does a person make that shift and become aware?
Sure. So what I do is I do take my clients through an emotional intelligence assessment so that they can see for themselves through that assessment where they stand. Because oftentimes we don't have that realistic picture, or just like you were coming to the table and saying, well, can we cry? Can we, so the emotional intelligence assessment really lets us know where am I right now in this stage of my development? Am I aware in that 5-part assessment? Am I regulating my emotions well? And once we get an assessment of where someone is, then we begin to work on that component. If it's self-awareness that we need to work on, then I take them through a series of trainings and conversations about, how they're processing things. Because oftentimes we don't see it, right? We don't see it until there's a disaster, right? Until there's a train wreck, until we get a complaint, until there's an IG investigation because we haven't handled something correctly. And so what I try to head that off, but sometimes the reason why they're with me is because there has been the train wreck. And so, and it's because they're not aware, right? Nobody intentionally plows into a brick wall, unless they're trying to kill themselves, right? So oftentimes when people hit a brick wall, whether it's personally and professionally because they feel that they can't grow and they don't know why, right? So they're hitting they think is a glass ceiling, but they're limiting themselves because they're not implementing these components of emotional intelligence. So we start with that self-awareness. How do you sound when you're talking to people? What are people saying about you? How are you processing things on a daily basis? Are you practicing mindfulness? Are you practicing active listening? Are you practicing the things that will help you become more self-aware? And then we go into self-regulation, and we start working on tools that help people regulate their emotions. Are you in practicing visualization? Are you practicing self-affirmations? So that, and positive affirmations rather, so that your emotional level by the time you get to work is here. Not, I got to get the kids ready. I got to get up, baby screaming, husband's short, child forgot the homework. I was up late working and till 5, and now it's 7, and here we go again. And so by the time I get to work, I'm already here. Right. And I'm pretending I'm here because that's just my life. That's my routine. But I'm here. So that as soon as when somebody comes in the door, it's or it's right. And so we got to get the realistic picture of what is the routine, what is the lifestyle that's bringing us to this brink, and then how do I get myself to a place, i.e. self-care, so that when I walk in the door, of home or of work, right? Because it's not just what are we doing at work, because as women, we do everything, right? So we're moms and we're wives and we're significant others, and we're all of that. And then we are who we are in the workplace. So we also don't want to leave work up here and then come home up here. And now we have issues in relationship because we haven't let any of this go. So it's that swing, right, of pendulum of life, and we have to catch it at both levels. So I take them through the assessment, we figure out where we are, and then we start developing plans of attack to address exactly where they are and give them tools to manage better. And it's a process, right? And we all have it. There is not one perfect person. There's not one perfect person. Even the person that seems very calm and serene and like they have it all together when they walk into work, can benefits from these trainings and benefits from the one-on-ones. And recently, Prince George's County government in Maryland, because I've done the leadership trainings on all of this, started giving me personal training for their deputy directors, because they could see that they could see the value of the one-on-one, so that it would make divisions in government function better. Because if you don't invest in your people, and government is run and businesses are run by people, if you don't invest in them, then ultimately what you're trying to do is going to fail holistically. So it requires buy-in from the top. It requires buy-in of the participant. It requires transparency and an understanding and a recognition that, we're human. We're human beings with human flaws, with emotions that God gave us. And we just need to know where to place them and how to place them correctly, and not pretend that they're just going to all fall into place magically at any given time. Because any given time when something goes on that's out of order can knock the pendulum out the park. And yep. And as I say in my book, one for emotional civility, one real bad outburst can dismantle your life.
Ooh, right? And words of wisdom.
We see it all the time, right? We see kids, you step on my tennis shoe, shooting you in the head, right? And now they're in jail for the rest of their life simply because someone stepped on their toe. Wow. And why? Because all of this was built up. It wasn't about the toe, right? It wasn't about the shoe. It was about something completely different. And that's, of course, an extreme. But we have a whole group of men and women locked up because of emotional or lack of emotional civility, emotional intelligence.
So much needed. WOIII, we want to thank Sharon Anderson, CEO of KCG Consulting. She gave us some great insight and perspectives on this emotional stability, civility, especially women in business and leadership. All of us, it doesn't matter male or female, we can see that we need this. So we're so appreciative of your insight. And we want to thank you, our audience, for tuning in today. And we hope that today's innovative nuggets of wisdom have inspired you to take action towards an even greater life. Join us each week live and hit the replay button if you missed it today. For more information and to join us as a moderator, board member, or to attend our annual Powerful Women Summit in August, see our website, WOIII.com, or contact myself, Sabrina Protic, or Miss Crystal Richardson for details. Have a great week and continue to live each day unapologetically with honor and gratitude. And remember, keep rising because, woman, you are powerful. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.